I wasn't supposed to be home that early. My last client canceled, and for once, I took it as a sign from the universe to breathe, to slip out before the office lights buzzed into overtime. All I wanted was a quiet dinner, maybe Mark's arms around me, and the feeling of home before the exhaustion swallowed me whole. The sun was still warm on my shoulders as I stepped out of the car, keys in hand, day behind me. I didn't expect the music. Soft, sultry jazz drifting through the front door, like some movie scene I hadn't auditioned for. And then I opened it. There she was, sprawled across my sofa like it had always been hers. Shoes off, wine in hand, legs tucked underneath her like she belonged. For a split second, I thought I'd walked into the wrong house. But the framed photos on the wall, the scent of my lavender diffuser, the dog leash by the door, no, this was mine, my home, my life. And she was right in the middle of it, like some twisted joke I hadn't been told yet. She looked at me, calm as ever, and smiled like we were old friends. "Oh, you're home early?" That voice. That face. I hadn't seen her in years, but I'd recognize Vanessa anywhere. Mark's ex, the one he swore was ancient history. My heart didn't race. It pounded, but I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. I just nodded, set my bag down, and sat across from her eye to eye. She said she was just waiting for Mark. That he told her to make herself comfortable. So that's what I did too. I made myself comfortable, and I waited. I watched her sip from my wine glass. No, our wine glass set. The ones we got on that Napa trip when Mark still remembered how to look at me like I mattered. Her lipstick marked the rim like a flag staked in stolen territory. She looked around the room like she was memorizing it, claiming it, assessing where she might hang her own memories. And yet, she said nothing else. Neither did I. But inside, my thoughts were a storm. Questions, accusations, flashes of every moment I trusted him while I worked late nights to help us. She crossed her legs and smirked. That same smug curve I'd once seen in an old photo Mark never meant for me to find. Her presence didn't feel accidental. It felt curated. Like she wanted me to see her there, cozy and barefoot, like I'd been replaced by someone from a forgotten chapter. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Not a raised voice, not a single crack. I just kept watching, breathing, letting the silence stretch long enough to make her uncomfortable. That was mine to control, at least for now. My mind started connecting dots that shouldn't have even existed. The times he was working late. The times he forgot I had mentioned dinner. The flashes of guilt I'd written off as stress. I wondered how many evenings she'd been here. How many times this scene had played out without me walking in to catch it. And as much as I wanted to cry, rage, demand answers, I didn't. I anchored myself in that chair like it was the only thing keeping me from floating away, because something told me. This wasn't just a mistake. Time started to warp. 5 minutes felt like 50. The clink of her glass, the ticking of the wall clock. Every sound was louder than it should have been. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, staring at the woman who once broke his heart and now had the nerve to waltz into my home like she'd never left. She wasn't just visiting, she was performing, testing how far she could push before I snapped. But I didn't give her that. I gave her stillness, composure, the kind you only learn when you've had to swallow betrayal before and make it look like grace. She expected drama. I offered silence. A silence that wrapped around both of us like a noose, tighter by the second. She shifted slightly, almost uncomfortable now, and I wondered, was this part of their plan? Or had she come here uninvited, armed with smugness and red wine, just to remind me who she once was to him? Then I heard it, the jingle of keys, a familiar step on the porch, and just like that, the front door opened. The door creaked open like it was just another evening. He stepped in humming, something upbeat, casual, and then stopped dead. I didn't even look at him right away. I was too focused on Vanessa's face, how her eyes lit up just a little at the sound of him, like this was some twisted reunion and not a ticking bomb. When I finally turned, Mark stood there frozen, keys dangling from his hand, mouth parted like a bad actor caught mid-line. "Aubrey," he said, breath shallow. "I thought you were working late?" I cut in, steady and sharp. "Or hosting your ex behind my back?" The words hung there like smoke, thick and undeniable. And God, I could feel the air shift, that crackle of truth pressing against the walls. Vanessa didn't move. She didn't even blink. She was enjoying it, every second of it. "And Mark?" he stammered. The man who always had an answer, a plan, a spin, suddenly tongue-tied. It's not what you think," he managed, the classic, the lazy fallback. And maybe it would have worked, if she hadn't been barefoot in my living room, drinking my wine, sitting in my spot. I glanced at her again. She smiled, that awful, smug little smile like she'd just won a prize. So I stood up, slow and certain, looked her straight in the eye, and said it, clear as crystal. "Get out of my house, now." She didn't budge, not right away. Instead, she let out a soft, amused laugh, like I'd just made an empty threat in a place that no longer belonged to me. Her fingers trailed lazily along the armrest as she rose, as if she needed to savor it, mark the moment. And Mark? He still hadn't moved. His silence was louder than any confession. I could feel it then, not just betrayal, but permission. He had let her in, not just into the house, into us. She walked past me like I was the guest. Her perfume lingered, that cloying sweetness I now hated without even knowing the brand. At the door, she turned to Mark, almost lovingly, and said, "Call me later." That was the knife, not even a flinch. She was sure he would. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't some misunderstanding. This was familiarity, routine. She knew her place here. And for the first time, I realized how long I hadn't. Then the door clicked shut behind her, and the silence hit like a tidal wave. No more distractions. Just me, Mark, and a truth I couldn't unsee. He opened his mouth again, probably to offer more pathetic excuses, but I raised a hand. Not to hit, not to scream, just to stop the noise before it started. He needed to hear the weight of what he'd done in the silence he helped create. I stood there for a moment, not speaking, just watching him squirm. His eyes kept darting to the door, as if Vanessa might walk back in and save him. But she wouldn't. Not now. This was his mess to sit in, and I made sure he sat in every second of it. "So," I said finally, voice low and even, "was that your idea of hospitality? Or did she just let herself in because she knows the code too?" His face paled. He didn't answer. Which was the answer. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to grab every picture off the wall and break the illusion we'd built together. But I didn't. That would have made it too easy for him, to cast me as dramatic, unstable, reactive. No. He needed to see what quiet devastation looked like. I looked around my own home like it was a stranger's, trying to count how many lies had lived here without me noticing. And even then, I didn't cry. Not yet. Because something in me had shifted. Something cold, but clear. This wasn't the moment I fell apart. This was the moment I saw things as they truly were. No filters, no fog, no more denial. And while Mark stood there fumbling for words, I was already choosing my next move, not to fix us, but to reclaim me. He followed me into the kitchen like a lost child, still offering half-baked apologies I didn't ask for. "She just stopped by," he said. "I didn't think—" I turned slowly, my back against the fridge, and looked him dead in the eye. "You didn't think I'd ever come home early, is that it?" He opened his mouth, but I wasn't done. She sat on our couch, drinking our wine, barefoot like she pays the mortgage. "And you expect me to believe this was spontaneous?" My voice didn't rise. It dropped, sharpened by every ounce of restraint I had left. I recited the scene like it was a police report. The red wine, the jazz, the way she smiled like she belonged here more than I did. I wanted him to feel every detail, Every flicker of violation I'd sat through while he was God knows where. He tried again. It meant nothing. I laughed. Laughed. The sound came out hollow, unfamiliar even to me. You think the betrayal is the affair, I said quietly. But it's not. It's the lies you built around it, the lies you lived in, the comfort you gave her while I gave you my trust. He dropped his eyes, and I knew this wasn't new. How long? I asked. How many nights did she replace me while I worked overtime to build a future with you? He didn't answer right away, just shifted his weight like the floor had grown too hot. And then he said it. The one thing that finally cut through my denial like a blade through silk. The truth is, it never really stopped, he muttered, almost like a confession to himself more than to me. My stomach dropped, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. I just stood there, hands braced on the countertop as the full weight of his cowardice settled in. He had looked me in the eye for months, kissed me goodbye, made me coffee, asked me how my day was, while Vanessa played house behind my back. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the performance. I thought about every night I'd come home too tired to eat, only to find his dinner waiting, warm, thoughtful, staged. I thought that was love. Turns out it was guilt, cooked, plated, served. My hands were cold now. I hadn't realized I was gripping the edge of the counter that hard. You let her into our life, I said slowly. Not just your bed. You gave her access to what I protected, what I sacrificed for. And still, he didn't offer a single apology that sounded real. So I walked out of the kitchen, picked up my phone from the hallway table like it was just another Tuesday. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just dialed. When Donna picked up, my lawyer, my friend, I didn't hesitate. Hi, Donna. Let's move forward with what we discussed. The words came out steady, rehearsed, because I had rehearsed them. I'd suspected something for a while, but now I didn't need suspicion. I had evidence. And I had resolve. Mark looked at me, stunned. Like he'd just realized I wasn't bluffing, that this wasn't going to end in a tearful fight and some weak promise to work through it. No. This was the consequence. The final act he never thought I'd write. Wait, Aubrey, can we just talk? I held up a hand again. Funny how silence had become my loudest weapon. I'd spent years letting him speak over my intuition. That part of me was gone now. He started pacing, his voice shaky. You're really calling lawyers? You're just throwing this away? I almost laughed again, but I didn't. I didn't throw anything away, Mark. You handed it over. Bit by bit, every time you let her in, every time you looked me in the eye and lied. I could see it land on him. Not just the words, but the realization that I wasn't angry. I was done. And that was more terrifying to him than any shouting match could ever be. As I walked past him toward the stairs, I felt strangely calm. Like I'd stepped out of a fog and could finally see where I was going. There was no part of me left that wanted answers. I already had what I needed, and I had a plan. He didn't know that I'd been gathering documents. He didn't know about the security footage, and he certainly didn't know what was waiting for him next. He didn't get the luxury of a warning. The envelope landed on his desk at work the next morning, hand-delivered by someone in a crisp blazer with the kind of expression that says, "This isn't personal, just official." Divorce papers, neatly printed, signed, dated, prepared with a quiet ruthlessness he never thought I had in me. I imagined him opening them between meetings, still wearing that same cheap cologne and thinking the world was intact. Until it wasn't. I had filed everything days before. While he kissed me goodnight and said, "I love you," with someone else's scent still on his shirt, I had been meeting with lawyers, documenting bank activity, downloading home security footage, and the prenup? Ironclad, with infidelity clauses he had once laughed off. "We'll never need this," he'd said. Turns out I did, and now, so did he. Because cheating doesn't just break hearts, it breaks contracts. Still, that wasn't the part that rattled him most. That came after. when he checked his phone and saw the email, the one I BCC'd to every neighbor on our street and to HR at Vanessa's office. Just a short clip from our door camera, Vanessa entering the house while I was scheduled to be away. Her face clear, her voice unmistakable. I didn't need revenge that screamed. I needed consequences that echoed. The fallout started fast. First came the neighborhood replies, the passive-aggressive, "So sorry you're going through this," messages from women who had smiled at us during barbecues. Some were genuine, others just hungry for drama. But they all saw the same footage. They all watched Vanessa laugh at my front door like she had keys to the kingdom. And Mark? He couldn't hide behind charm when the whole street had seen him stripped down to what he really was, a liar with terrible taste. Then came the call from Vanessa's company. HR didn't need much convincing. Their policies were strict, no personal involvement with clients, no visits to client homes. I hadn't even needed to explain. The clip spoke for itself. She was fired within 24 hours. Just like that. All that smugness she wore like perfume, gone, replaced by panic, emails, desperate attempts to clarify things. She even tried to reach out to me. I didn't respond. I wanted her to feel what I had, the cold edge of being shut out without explanation. Mark tried too. First with guilt, then with anger. "You went too far, Aubrey," as if I was the one who crossed the line. He still didn't get it. This wasn't about getting even. This was about balance, about reminding him, and her, that there are women who don't just cry when betrayed. Some of us rebuild while you're still sweeping up the mess. And when we're done, you barely recognize the place you once thought was yours. By the end of the week, the silence from Mark was louder than any argument we'd ever had. No calls, no texts, just nothing. He was cornered by legal consequences, professional shame, and a reality he hadn't planned for. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't begging. I was moving. Forward. Without him. I could almost see the moment he realized it, that I was no longer the woman standing quietly in a kitchen full of betrayal. I was the one flipping the script, without needing to say a word. Friends started reaching out, some shocked, others not at all. Apparently, Vanessa had never been subtle. But no one had expected me to be the one who took the knife and turned it into strategy. And that's the thing, isn't it? People think silence means weakness. That quiet means we don't notice. But the truth is, I noticed everything. I just waited for the moment where noticing turned into action. And when it did, I made sure it counted. So while Mark dealt with lawyers and whispers and Vanessa vanished from LinkedIn overnight, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea and my spine straighter than it had been in months. The house was finally still, not empty, but mine. And yet, I wasn't done. Not quite yet. There was still one final piece left to reclaim. The papers were signed, the prenup held. The house was mine. Not out of vengeance, but because it was never just about the bricks and furniture. It was about what I had built here, what I had poured myself into while he was busy tearing it down in secret. And now, with his name stripped from the deed and the locks changed, I stood in the living room and breathed for the first time without anger sitting on my chest. I started redecorating, not to erase him, but to reclaim the space he tried to corrupt. The sofa? Gone. I donated it without ceremony. The one she sat on, so casually. I picked out a new one. Velvet, deep green, strong, unexpected, just like me. The walls got a fresh coat of paint. Something brighter, warmer. No more of his cold grays and sterile whites. I filled the shelves with things that made me feel at home. Not us. Me. One afternoon, I stood by the window with a glass of wine, my wine, and looked out over the neighborhood. It all looked the same. Same trees, same sidewalks, same neighbors pretending not to peek through blinds. But I had changed. This house had changed. It wasn't just a space anymore. It was a declaration. And as the sun sank low and the room glowed golden, I finally sat down, in the very spot where she once dared to sit, and felt something close to peace. I didn't redecorate out of bitterness. I did it out of ceremony. Every throw pillow, every lamp, every new picture frame was part of a quiet ritual, a way of cleansing, of rewriting what these walls had witnessed. I kept the houseplants. They'd survived through it all. I admired them for that. There was something comforting about their quiet resilience, how they kept growing, even in spaces that had gone cold, just like I had. There were moments, I'll admit, when echoes crept in, the sound of his laugh from an old memory, the phantom presence of him coming down the stairs. But I didn't push them away. I let them drift through, like ghosts passing on their own terms. I didn't need to pretend it hadn't happened. I just refused to let it define what came next. This house, these rooms, they weren't soaked in pain anymore. They were grounded in power. Mine. And maybe the best part? I didn't feel lonely. People always assume women like me, women who walk away, must be aching to be filled back up again, with company, with romance, with noise. But I wasn't aching. I was settling in, into my own company, my own stillness. I didn't need someone else on the sofa next to me to feel complete. I had myself, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine, not to forget, but to honor the version of me that refused to be erased. I curled up on the new sofa, legs tucked beneath me, phone in hand. The house was quiet, but not empty. It breathed differently now, not under the weight of secrets, but in the light of truth. I opened my messages, scrolled past the ones from friends checking in, and found his name still sitting in my contacts. One last message. Simple. Final. I typed, "She made herself at home. I made sure neither of you would have one." I hit send, not out of spite, but out of closure. He needed to know what dignity looked like when it didn't flinch, and I needed to say it, not for him, but for me. Not everything needs to be screamed to be heard. Sometimes the sharpest words are the ones whispered with a calm that's earned, not given. I turned the lights down, tucked the blanket around my shoulders, and let the silence settle in again. This was my home now, not because I won it, but because I reclaimed it. Every corner, every memory, every ounce of it. I didn't just survive what he did, I transformed it. And when I finally closed my eyes that night, I wasn't thinking about him, or her, or what I'd lost. I was thinking about everything I was finally free to build.